world's not fair, but at least going through that Q course, we were all in the same playing field. We just had to either figure it out or we weren't through the course. My biggest thing was just realizing that the guys to my left and right were in the same boat, felt the same, and they were at the same level as me.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Casazza, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with a SEAL. Today's guest was part of our 30-day Warrior Roulette Challenge in July. He is a former Green Beret assigned to 2nd Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group Airborne as a Special Forces Weapons Sergeant. He has deployed on 7 tours. He was also an instructor for the Q course. He served our beautiful country for 18 and a half years before medically retiring. Today, he is a founder of Joint Task Force K9s to help combat veteran and law enforcement suicide. Ladies and gentlemen, Keith Holland. Keith, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, Gina, thank you for having me. It's an honor for being here and kind of being able to share my experiences through the military and then currently now after the military and how the everyday struggles in life has changed my look on how we started and then now where we're at currently. So
I normally don't get super excited to get to the end because I really want to hear the journey, but being that I got the experience with you with the K9 and, and what you do in your nonprofit and knowing you on that level prior to being on the show, I am really excited to talk to how you got there. But before we get there, I want to talk about, we're going to go to the beginning because, it's a show, we got to start somewhere. And I found out you are 4th generation veteran. So your family has been serving for 4 generations. Is that correct?
Actually, even farther back than that, believe it or not. Yeah. So as far as we can track, we've had somebody in our family in the military on one side or the other for sure.
Wow. So was it obviously it's in your blood. Was it something you knew you were going to do at such a young age, or were you deciding on something else?
I did. I was always that kid that hung around in the woods, wanted to be a survivalist, go out with my dad's old military equipment, and I would take it out in the woods, and I would just be out there all day, cooking stuff that I'd catch in the creek and eating vegetables and stuff off the ground. I mean, it was truly when I grew up. The kids nowadays, they got these phones and stuff. We didn't have a clue what a phone was, so if we didn't keep ourselves busy, we got in trouble. So I was never at home. I was always outside from sun up to sundown. And of course, back when I was growing up, when the lights come on, that's when you're supposed to come back inside, and that's usually dinner time. And then that was it. We didn't have all these phones that tell us, oh, it's time for dinner, or we got this meeting or this whatever. So it was like you go play hard all day, and then you come home when that light switches on. And if you don't get there in time, mama or daddy is going to be there waiting on you. So
where did you grow up? What part of the U.S.?
So just west of Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a little small podunk town, Bessemer City. So of course I didn't have much to do outside of being, in the woods, but it taught me a lot of different things. And it taught me how to be one with nature, where I think most of our kids nowadays, they miss that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I grew up on Long Island, so it's an island, and we're more on the beach, we're on the water, so it's a totally different experience. Because now that I'm in South Carolina, I mean, just talking to the mailman yesterday, I mean, the first thing I ask people is what have you encountered here? I don't encounter anything on Long Island. There's not one creature I have to worry about besides a gardener snake, and that's nothing, that's not going to bite me as little, it's crazy. Here, I have to worry about copperheads. Then the guy was like, oh, the black widows. And then he mentioned some other animal. And I go, I'm done. Why am I here? I can't do this. So I'm assuming did you have any fears when you were just growing up, shooting the breeze out back, in the wilderness?
I mean, not really. I was never afraid to be alone. My parents were divorced when I was young. So I was kind of and I had a smaller brother. So I was always the protector, the helper to my dad, because we lived with my dad. I was just always been put in that position of responsibility from early on. I think that had a big thing of I didn't have the opportunity to be scared because I had a job and responsibilities to take care of, even as a young kid.
And what branch did your dad serve?
So my dad was a Navy guy. He was on active duty for a while, up until the time my parents got divorced. Shortly after that, he got out of active duty status and was a CB and finished his career in the CB. And of course, he wanted me to go Navy, and I'm not one to be out in the big pond with no land in sight for months at a time. Just not my cup of tea.
So you always knew you were going to go Army?
Yeah, my grandfather was in the Army, and then of course generations before that, it was pretty much just strictly Army type situations. So
when did you decide to go the special forces route?
I started off as a military police in the Army, so I spent about 3.5 years doing that. And it wasn't until 9/11 happened, really into the military lifestyle. I decided to go active duty during that time because I did start off in the National Guard, but I went active duty because of September 11th, and first place they sent us was to the Pentagon to protect the Pentagon for security, because it had just been hit by the plane. And then the next thing you know is I'm training up to do, this competition and that competition. I'm just striving to be my best. And that's one thing I've always been since a kid, is I've always been wanting to be the best that I could be. And my daddy always taught me, always do the right the first time, and you don't have to try to redo it the second time. I decided that I didn't want to be in a military police. I wanted to be best of the best and do it right. I didn't even know what special forces was. Only thing I was told was, hey man, you want to go do Rambo stuff? So me and my buddy, we went and tried out at selection. He didn't get picked up. He failed at a land nav portion of it. And I was able to do the land nav, and I got picked up. That was shortly after our trip to the Pentagon. I went to selection. My guys were getting ready to deploy, and I didn't want to deploy with just a standard Army unit. I wanted to be well equipped. I wanted to be around the best people that wanted the same things that I wanted, and so that's why I started the Q course, and I did that in 2003. So it would have been the winter of 2003 is when I started the process of going through the Q course and winning my Green Beret.
How was it going through winter?
Winter was bad, but there was another class that was worse than ours. We missed the ice storm and everything just barely that came through that year. And when it came through, we had trees falling down on guys, people falling on trucks where the cadres was driving. It was pretty bad. A lot of people got hurt. A lot of people didn't get to finish their Q course or their selection experience.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Did you have any trouble from a young age? You've had this responsibility, and you always had that protective nature and that take charge. And also as someone that takes pride in their work, and you want to be the best of the best and stuff. Was it an easy road for you in terms of going into the Army, and was it an easy transition to that sort of life? And then how was it for you transitioning then to go through the Q course?
So transitioning in the Army, it was a little different because I was older coming in, but I had to go through all the steps except basic training, right? I had to go through all the regular steps everybody goes through, and I'm this older E4. Typically, I would have probably been an E5 if I'd have started on active duty. So when I went through, I was with a bunch of 18-year-old kids.
And how old were you?
I would have been 24, I would say. Let's see, 2000, 2003. I was born in 98. So yeah, I would have been 24, 25-ish, starting back into that active duty military career, which luckily I didn't have to go through basic again, because I don't know if I would have been able to handle that. Already been through it once and know the game and stuff. And I'm not one that's too good with games. I don't like playing games. I'm upfront and honest, and that's just how I am. So
what were the struggles for you, and how did you manage those struggles?
The struggles for me was getting out of my own head, right? Because my biggest struggle was I wanted to be with the best. Everybody around me was wanting to be with the best, but not everybody had the integrity to or just to be able to just keep everything together, right? And keep everything wired tight, because you're expected to work as teams. You're expected to work as an individual. And some guys can work really well as teams. Some guys work really well as individuals, but not everybody always work together or can do both. I was one of those guys. It took me a little bit to figure out the teamwork, because I did a lot of stuff as a police officer, as an individual. So, and as I was growing up, I was always kind of a loner out in the woods by myself. So my biggest struggle is trying to find my way into working in that team environment and not getting frustrated with myself, because I'm very I hold myself to very high standards, and when I don't meet those standards, I come down on myself pretty hard. So that would have been my biggest struggle, trying to make my way to the special forces.
What did you learn about teamwork that you didn't know that that helped you a lot?
I learned about teamwork is you have to have the faith and the trust in your guys to your left and right, that they're there for a reason, and that as long as the standards and stuff don't change and they're getting graded on the same thing I was getting graded on, everything was going to be necessarily fair, right? The world's not fair, but at least going through the Q course, we were all on the same playing field. We just had to either figure it out, or we weren't going to make it through the course. My biggest thing was just realizing that the guys to my left and right were in the same boat, felt the same, and they were at the same level as me compared to what the guys I was used to working with in the regular Army or in the National Guard. There's just very dramatic differences in the two.
Yeah, we had Coach Mac, the SEAL that trained me in the first episode, and he talked about how it doesn't matter who you are. When you come in, you're all on the same playing field. Like, everyone's taking the same beating every single day, the same stuff. Doesn't matter if you're short, tall, fat, skinny, whatever. Like, and he said, it's just, they don't change. It's the same. And, obviously there are things that are out of your control that makes it unfair. Like, there's just even acts of God. Like you said, a tree falls on you, and it's just like, oh my God, like you said, people were getting injured and all that. But when you're showing up every day to one of the things that really helped me, and this is how I ended up learning what teamwork really was when we were lined up and we were absolutely freezing. We just got out of the swell. It was dark, no sun to heat us up. We're all shaking and shivering, and I'm miserable. And all I'm thinking about is me and how miserable I am. And I look at the guy next to me and his lips are purple. And I'm like, oh my God, he's suffering just as much as me. Suck it up, and it helped me to get through it and to realize, like, and I think that's where the bonding really comes in, because you're all on that. You're all going through the exact same thing. Now, we handled that differently. We have different emotions and different things. Like, what was a struggle for your friend with land nav wasn't a struggle for you. But, in a sense, it's the same test. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. What did you essentially, or was there anything that you struggled with, or did you go through everything first time?
No, I pretty much made everything first time. I've always been really good and been lucky. For me, the Q course kind of just fell in line with everything I've done my entire life up to that point. The biggest difference, again, is the teamwork and having to do things through other people. But just like you were saying, a lot of people, and I was there for a little bit as well. I'm in my own brain. I'm sucking. I'm thinking, oh my God, this sucks. Well, one thing I have learned that is, you look to your left and right, and those guys are sucking too. But the ones that aren't talking about it, they're actually handling it better, because what ends up happening is you get in your own mind because you're talking about how bad you suck. And mind over matter is a real thing, right? And in the Q course and selection, the biggest thing was they wanted to see if you had the guts to get through it, if you had the fortitude, if you could just stay in the fight, because everybody, like you said, is on the same level. We're all sucking. But if you allowed yourself to go downhill because you're talking yourself out of it by saying, I'm hurting, my feet hurt or whatever, then that was another big thing for me, because like I was I was in military police. I rode around in Humvees and cars before. And yeah, I did some walking and training, but I wasn't used to carrying heavy weight on my back in my boots. So after selection and some of the Q course, my feet were just hamburger meat. I was sucking and I let it known that I was sucking. And I just noticed that I wasn't going anywhere. So I had to change that mindset. And I think it came better from a ranger buddy of mine that said, dude, instead of worrying about you sucking, look to your right and left and start laughing because we're all sucking. And that laughing is what kind of got me through it. And that's what really, and if you talk to people in the military, we all make jokes about the worst things and the ugliest things and some of the most inappropriate things. But that's a way of coping and managing with this, because if we can just get through those initial bumps and lumps about how bad we're sucking, and we can make it into a laughter event. And you can probably talk to a lot of people during the middle of firefights. We're sitting there laughing and talking to each other, like joking, because it keeps our mind in the fight, but it also keeps us in reality, right? The key to it all is, not recognizing that you're sucking all the time, but recognize that everybody's sucking and you just gut it out. And if you can gut it out 9 times out of 10, you can make it in the soft community, unless you're just that one person that they're not looking for whatsoever.
Do you recall a time that was like your worst, really bad, whether it was combat, whether it was, through training, anything that like just really, really was terrible?
I would say the sleep deprivation, because we would pull night shifts and guards and fire guard and watch and stuff, and I was just constantly, because I wasn't used. I wasn't in the infantry. I was coming from an MP unit, and I wasn't used to having to stay up through all these weird hours and get up in the middle of the nights and doing all this stuff. So during some of that, I thought I was literally dreaming. I was seeing stuff, and then of course you have all your ranger buddies that's telling you, yeah, dude, this happens in ranger school, and you'll be walking along and then you'll come to a halt, and then the bush in front of you would think was your buddy, and the next thing you know, your buddy's already gone and the bush is still sitting there. That sleep deprivation really can get to you and really change the reality in a whole. It took me a little bit to kind of get past that, because I just didn't know, sometimes I thought I was dreaming, sometimes I wasn't. So reality was kind of blended in. And that's all from that, lack of sleep, not being used to all the long, heavy ruck marches and whatnot. It was a complete shock for me when I went through the selection in the Q course.
How do you get your body and your mind and yourself to adjust and to keep on going? Because it seems like you had that never quit attitude. I don't know. It sounds to me like quitting didn't even cross your mind. Like you're like, I was going to get through it. Like I knew it. But how do you get your body and your mind on the same? Well, your mind is the I'm never going to quit. But then the other part of your mind that's like, you're sleep deprived, the body's exhausted. You just, how do you get yourself to adjust and to continue to get through it?
I honestly think it's mostly genetics. Some people can handle that type of stuff. Some people can't. For me, once I figured out what the problem was, right, that I was the problem, that the biggest thing was just letting that problem go, right? Remember, looking at your buddy to your right or your left and laughing. You're taking yourself out of a bad situation that everybody's in. So it's almost like you just picture yourself not being there, and then you're looking towards the end because the prize is at the end, right? That's what we're going for. We're going for the prize. And for me, the prize wasn't graduating. It wasn't getting a Green Beret. For me, it was protecting my country, protecting my kids, carrying on a lifelong thing that my family has done since the beginning. Just having the mindset of, I don't want to let these people down, and I don't want to let my people around me down and my family down, and I just can't fail. And I have that, and I think this, not everybody has that no fail attitude, and just to be able to gut it out. I mean, I'd like to say there's a magic pill that somebody could take, but I think you either have that or you don't. And it shows in the battlefield, because you can fake the funk But when it comes down to it, and it's like this for Green Berets and everybody else, until it comes down to it and the bullets are flying, you really don't know how you're going to react, right? So for me, it was learning how I was going to react to each new obstacle or each new event. And that's what kept me in a fight, but then always just wanting to be the best. And that was what was keeping me from quitting necessarily, is I didn't want to look like a failure to anybody, mostly myself, because if I fail, then I take it as a failure to myself personally. So for me, it was more of a personal thing than what anybody else ultimately thought. But I didn't want to tarnish by quitting, right? Because my daddy always taught me, right? Quitters never win. And if you quit, you don't even have a chance to win. That would probably be the way I got, just the mental toughness of wanting to be the best, never quit attitude, and just having the gutting it out, regardless of how the body felt. Mind over matter is a real thing. And I've seen people, get shot, have limbs blown off, whatever, and was still fighting to the last minute. And it saved their lives in a lot of times because it gave them that opportunity. But if let's say you get shot or something in combat and you're just sitting there thinking about, oh, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Well, guess what? You've lost that fight. So I think most of it's a mental thing, and having that mental toughness and fortitude just to keep in the fight.
It's interesting because it reminds me of I think it was Dan O'Shea was on the podcast, he's a Navy SEAL, and he mentioned and a lot of Navy SEALs have said this, where when you quit buds, it sticks with you forever. Like everybody forgets about it, but because and you get actually Diego Ugalde was on the podcast and he got let go from buds. Okay. 8 years later, he was having these nightmares for 8 years. He's like, I had nightmares about buds, just on the fact that he didn't quit. He just got let go and it eats at you. It eats you. And then he went back and he went through it and got through it. But, that sits with you. And like you said, it's like that failure to yourself eats and eats and eats away at you. And the pain is temporary. It's going to end. You're going to get through it. You just got to get through this really, really hard challenge. And really, it's the words that you're telling yourself. Yeah.
It's definitely more of a mental thing. If you keep telling yourself good words and stuff like that, and affirmations and stuff like that, those things are going to come to light. But if you look for the bad side, then guess what? You're going to find the bad side, and it's going to be failure.
So when you then became a Green Beret and did you, well, I mean, for you, it wasn't really it was always to serve the country and to protect your family and to protect the American people, which I think is absolutely incredible. How was your time then before you became an instructor and started to medically retire?
I had 4 years on the teams, and then I went and done my instructor time, and then I went back to the teams, and then finally getting medically retired. Right. So going to the teams, those first 3 years, I was still learning. Even though I graduated the Q course and learned my job, the guys that goes to the teams, you really don't even know your job until being on a team for a couple of years. It takes 2 or 3 years before you really even know your job. And it really depends on the people around you too, that's actually giving you guidance, right? Because SF is some of the top of the top. There's a lot to learn, and it's not only individual jobs, but we do cross training and we do all this. That way we can go out in these small units and still complete the mission, even though we don't have, all of the key elements of the team. We use that. We rely on that cross training. For me, going through the different phases, because I was on a regular team, and then I was in a SIF team, which was a DA team, and did hostage rescue and stuff. And we worked for the commander. When I was on a regular team, it was a totally different mission. So for me, change was good, because what it would happen was I'd get comfortable in one place, and once I got comfortable, I started dropping things, right? And it's called complacency, right? So I needed change to re-get that boost. I needed that higher mission. I was always looking for that next mission to go to, right? So when we were back in the rear, things slowed down. I was more affected as far as like for future stuff, because all my past would start coming up, all the negative stuff. PTSD started sinking in about my third year being on a team due to, just not only everything that happened in the combat zones and everything else, but also from childhood. Because a lot of guys in the soft community, we have messed up childhoods. I think is a lot of times is what puts us in that protector mode, that leader mode, that because we don't want that to happen to anybody else, and we dang sure ain't gonna allow it to happen to us again, right? So I think that's why a lot of us that has, let's say, a crazy past, right, as kids, that's why we kind of go into the field of the soft community. So for me, it was just always needing that next bump to do better, to always do better. Because if you get stagnant, for me, when I got stagnant on a team or wasn't doing anything or learning anything different, that's when, the demons start coming up, and when life starts slowing down. But as long as I was go and volunteering to go on deployments and doing this and that, everything else was just pushed back to the side. So one thing I've seen the guys in the soft communities, we don't address our issues. We just push them to the side. We throw them in our rucksack and keep stacking them up. And then eventually they catch up with us. And that's what happened to me. 2015, I had a suicide attempt while on active duty. I had already, during my instructor time, we recognized that there were some issues going on. They got me on some medications, PTSD. I did some hyperbaric chamber treatment, and things were good. But then we got back into the mix, and more explosives, more TBIs. It just, everything kicked right back up again. Each time we slowed down, it just made all my past issues even come back stronger. So by the time I had my suicide attempt, I had already been through two marriages. I was probably in the lowest place I could ever be. I was actually fighting, kicking, and screaming when they went to medically retired me. I didn't want to go because the military was pretty much all I knew for 18 and a half years. And it was kind of like my identity. When I was pushed out, I didn't want to go. But ultimately, when I got out and I recognized and I learned from all the treatments and everything, I learned ultimately that it was the best choice that could have happened, because I wasn't going to heal, and I wasn't going to heal from any of my past stuff, because I was always looking forward for that next big mission, that next big rush. So I never slowed down enough to take care of myself. And that's a big problem across the board with everybody in the soft community. We're always go. We're always fight. And we don't slow down enough. That's kind of what got me started in the dog world. Is after I medically retired, I received my dog 3 years later, which really got my life back on track, gave me a mission that now it changes every day, because I'm training every dog differently, and I'm training them for different people, and I'm training them. I'm not doing cookie cutter training, right? So I think my whole military experience, because I was always trying to go to the next biggest thing, it was a detriment because I never addressed anything in my past. So once I made it through the Q course, and once I made it through my instructor time and did a little bit of healing during my instructor time and went back to the team, it was almost like I was behind. I was just so behind, but I was just still putting that stuff back because I didn't want to deal with it. And then when they finally said you're done, I had to deal with it all at once, and it was rough. It was a life-changing event for me.
Now, what was the treatment that changed your life?
So we did. I've done it all, and I was the type of person that, if I'm going to do something, I'm 100% in it. So if I'm going to try to heal myself, I'm going to heal myself, right? So, I was on 16 different medications 3 times a day. When they medically retired me, I was doing all kind of counseling, therapy, you name it. I was doing hyperbaric chamber. I was doing physical treatments like PRP and stem cell therapy. So all that had its effects of healing, but ultimately it was getting my dog and realizing and learning how to communicate with him and working through my frustrations through his behaviors is what did it. Kind of reset my brain, and then just helping others. And then when I was helping others, it gave me an opportunity to self-assess myself, because each time they would say an issue was going on, I would check back in with myself and say, like, hey, I got this issue too. How do we go about fixing it? Right. Over 6 years of working with other organizations and helping run their dog programs and learning everything I could about the dog, it really put my mindset back to where it needed to be. And I was seeing the big picture instead of just always looking to the front. And then each time I had somebody call me and ask me for help or direction or guidance, just to talk them off of a cliff, that was just more fuel to the fire for me to keep doing what I was doing, and to expand that to where now I'm giving these service dogs, these life-saving dogs, to the guys and gals, and it's completely free for them. So yeah, I could be training these dogs and selling them as, protection dogs or whatever. But for me, my mission, my goal is to fight suicide, because I lived it. And the last thing I want to see is for my brothers and sisters to go through what I had to go through, because people don't get it. You tell people you have PTSD, everybody says, well, yeah, you got PTSD, but they don't understand it. Nobody understands it. The therapists don't understand it. The doctors, they try to say they understand it, but they don't. If you've lived it, you understand it. I've lived it, and I think that's what's made me so good at doing these dogs, because I know the outcome of the dog's training, and if it's not done properly, it's not going to affect the guys and gals like it should. And now the dogs is just one small piece of the pie, right? It takes a lot of different perspectives. Therapy's part of it. Medicine may be part of it, but you have physical health is part of it. I think it takes the whole piece of pie to become whole again. And the dogs are just a small part of it. And that's one reason why I'm teaming up with other organizations, so I can help the guys and gals that are coming through my programs. And if I can't help them personally through a dog, we can find out a different way to get them help. And that's what helped me and got me to where I'm here today, is other organizations looking for answers to my problems. But ultimately it's your nonprofits. That's what's doing the heavy lifting. I wish it wasn't so. I wish the VA would do that, but they're only going to do things once they don't have to spend as much money to heal the guys. Until then, they're just going to try to cover their symptoms instead of the root cause.
Now, you said you worked with like 8 different organizations before you started your own. Now, I've talked to you prior to this, and I had a little canine workout, and your program sounds very, very unique compared to other organizations out there. What I want to know is, well, first of all, I'd love for you to tell us what makes your program so unique and that type of training that you do, and how you came up with this.
I wish I could be the one that says it was all me, but it wasn't. I learned everything I did from another organization that gave me my dog originally, Special Operations Wounded Warriors. They gave me my dog 7 years ago, and I fell in love with the dog. And I was never a dog handler. I took some bites while I was on active duty, but I was never a handler. But once I learned to communicate with a dog, I just wanted to do everything with the dog. I learned the philosophy, and then I started embedding dogs and training dogs and taking dogs to clients. And then that shifted over to helping out nonprofits and helping them train their dogs and everything, with just learning all the different avenues and perspectives of doing all the different types of trainings and involved with the different organizations. I decided that we needed more dogs out there. I decided I wanted to stand up a program, but I didn't want it to be like everybody else's. I didn't want a cookie cutter program. I wanted this to be by the individual, because every individual's needs are different, even though we may have the same type problems. For me, I took the good and the bad out of all these different organizations that I worked with, And then I looked at what was the outcome, what do I want my dogs to do, and do I want them to actually be true service dogs, or do I just want them to be obedient dogs that can just walk and go with the guys and gals and just be there? And for me, I know I needed a true service dog. And so I was like, you know what? I'm not going to half ass it. I'm going to go and do it the full effect. I just revisited my old school train of thought, be the best.
Yeah, yeah, not your
Right.
mentality to half-ass it. No,
So,
not your style.
so I start the puppies between 8 and 6 week old. It's very obedience based. I train the dogs like soldiers. I train them like they're going to be little special forces or Navy SEAL guys running across the beach or whatever, right? And I do that from the mind set of a soldier too, right? I don't bond with these dogs, and there's a reason, right? Because these dogs need to bond with their handler. And my guys will tell you, every one of them that's received these dogs are trying to bond with them immediately because they've been with me for a whole year of doing training, and it's every day the same training, basically every day. Like, training doesn't stop once these guys get their dogs. Every step through their life as they go outside in the public, it's a training event. So the way I train these dogs is through that same type of philosophy. They go through my life with me, and I train them as they go through my life, and that covers the obedience. Then we train the working side of them, right? I train the scent side of them. Um, if I got a guy that's got PTSD, and all my dogs are trained primarily for PTSD, and they'll stop about 98% of the attacks from happening. And I do that by using cortisol levels to train the guys and gals, and I use their handlers' cortisol to train their dogs. So before they really even meet the guy or the gal on a permanent basis, they already know who their handler is because they have been trained on their scent.
Now, when do you know? Like, when you get the dog, well, we worked with Bear, right? 6 months old, you get them, 6 to 8 weeks. Like, do you know, okay, this is going to be their handler, like the moment you get the dog, or is it like later on you learn?
I don't. I may have an idea where I want the dog to go. You got to remember, these guys are starting from like little bitty hairballs, and by the time they're done, it's been a year. So they're going to go through changes in their personality and stuff. I don't try to adjust their personality, because what it allows me to do is see what the dog is truly about, and then as long as the recipient is honest, right, and truthful about what they're looking for in a dog and what they need, then I'm able to check out the personality of the dog itself and match that personality with the guys and gals. And I do that, like I said, by multiple assets, right? I do it by what kind of dog do they want? What are they interested in? Are they wanting a more type A type of dog? Are they wanting more of a type B dog, or something that's going to be more chill? And then I got to watch how the dogs grow up and do their training. So I may place a dog with a guy initially as a puppy, because that's what I see them happen initially. But as that puppy changes, and then we get the therapy involved, and the guys and gals get to play with these dogs and interact with these dogs and complete tasks with these dogs under stress, then I get to see who's actually working well together, who's getting benefits, who's trying to bond, because these dogs are picking their handlers. If I just try to put a dog with somebody and I don't try to match the personality, the dog's not going to have anything to do with the guy or gal. But if I watch the dog, and I can actually kind of mold the dog's behavior as well. So if I have a specific dog that really needs to go to a specific person, I can mold that dog just by every day working it and basically getting into a routine, and then teaching the dog exactly what. And that's what I do. I don't train the dogs necessarily to do anything special, minus the scent work with the cortisol. But I allow dogs to be dogs, because dogs are going to tell you what they're going to do before they do it. They're going to be dogs. And as soon as we start trying to teach a dog to be something else, they're no longer dogs, right? So my thing is to keep them in a mindset of being a dog, just watch them grow, learn their personalities, and then match them. For instance, if I had a guy that wanted to go mountain climbing all the time, right, and he was going to want to take his dog with him, we may give him a lighter, smaller type dog, because he's going to have to hoist him up cliffs or whatnot, or the dog's going to have to be more agile. But if we got a guy that is going to be not so active, right, just a guy that just needs to go to work and come back home and just get into a routine, maybe we get a dog that's just not as athletic, right, or not interested in that, because all dogs have their own personalities. So we watch the dogs grow, we watch the people, and then as they get to that 8-month mark is when I try to start placing them permanently based off of each personality of the dog and the people.
That is really, really interesting. Yeah, that when we first was talking about your nonprofit, I knew I needed to get you on the show because it's so unique. It's so different. And also your story of how it came about is really interesting, because you lived it. You're not just one that's like, I see it, I want to help somebody. It's like, I want to help somebody because I went through all this, and
Yep.
this is and the dog helped me, and I want to help others. And I love how you are incorporating not just the dog into it, or the therapy, the whole healing package, because like you said, you went through it all and to get to where you are today. So what have you learned today that you wish you had with you when you were in the service?
The biggest thing is you can't control everything around you, regardless of how much you think you can, how much you train, how much you work as a team, as an individual, whatever. Murphy is always going to stick his head in. Usually when Murphy sticks his head in, bad things happen. So you just got to be prepared and flexible with every minute, knowing that you can't control what the outcome is always going to be. And giving up that control, it was a big for me coming out, because I was that go-getter, that guy that wanted to control the outcome of everything, felt that I could control it. But again, that was all that stuff just getting packed in the back saying, I can control you, go away. I'm not going to deal with you today. Instead, now that I'm out, I let it happen and I work through the situation instead of trying to control the situation and just stick it in my backpack. Talking to others that are like-minded, that understands what I'm going through and what I've gone through, is just as much healing as anything else as well. I mean, that's a big part of it. And I had to realize that it's okay to talk to others, because they're going through the same thing. They're not wanting to talk to nobody. And when you don't talk to anybody about your issues, then nothing can get resolved. But when you start working together, and that's one reason why I do the therapy as part of my course, is we get the guys every evening in a circle, and each person tells their story each night. One person tells their story each night. And I do that specifically, not for a therapy, like you got to have therapy and you got to talk about your issues. No, it's more or less like, hey, this is where we're at. This is my issues, because guess what? The person beside you are having the same issues. They just don't have the courage to say it, or they don't recognize it because they don't want to see it. So that's why I do the therapy portion with my program. And that's why I think it works so well, is just being able to talk to like-minded people that you've worked with or worked in the same situation scenario. It gives strength when you're telling your story and the same guy beside you has that same story. And then that just builds, and then it's just one big snowball going down the hill. And it's like an avalanche, right? If you can get everybody on the same sheet of music, instead of saying, yeah, I ain't got no issues, that avalanche is going down the hill. It's going to clear the whole path. You just got to stay out of the way and let it do its work, instead of beating on your chest, being like, I'm a Special Forces Navy SEAL PJ that don't need any help. Yeah, we all need help at sometimes, regardless of what unit and what tier we are. Sometimes just talking about it with our friends is the way to go. And I had to learn that, because I totally was the textbook example of what not to do, with PTSDs and TBIs, and and not taking a knee until I was forced to.
And what do you have for us, or all the listeners on the show, that we can do on a daily basis to combat the storms that will be coming our way?
Ultimately, you better turn to God. We're a faith-based organization. I believe in God. Without God, we don't have anything. Regardless if you want to praise him or not, he's there. I think that's the number one thing. You got to have faith, something bigger than you. And I think that faith can get you through a lot of stuff. Outside of that, trying to stay proactive, just being proactive and keeping an open mind, because there's a lot of people out there, even people that's not in the military, that has the same issues as you do, or as we do. They've got some good input as well. So we just need to keep our eyes and ears open, pay attention to each other, keep God as number one, and look after our brothers and sisters, because we're the only ones that's going to help us. We're not going to get any help from anybody else, and we have to be our brothers' keepers.
Thank you so much for that. That was fantastic. And thanks for being on the show. It was awesome to hear your story and to hear more about your amazing organization. I'm going to say it again for all of our listeners. It is Joint Task Force K9s. It's a nonprofit. It's located in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And you could also find it online, find Keith online. And thank you, Keith, so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me. And I really enjoyed it. Look forward to some more of this and maybe some follow-up interviews if you like.
Definitely. That sounds great. We could even go out with show us the facility, show us what you do and stuff. That'd be really fun.
Yeah, we can definitely get the different dogs involved, and maybe we could get a group of trainees in and do a little mini show.
That would be really cool. And thank you again for being here. We'll definitely be having you back on the show and do some more collaborating. For everyone that's listening, please like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Patreon member so you get access to our bonus episodes, and tune in next week for the show. Thank you for listening.